I have had this rewarding experience of working with a lot of students alongside Kunjan. Hi, my name is Srinjay, and I'm a partner and director in Tutela. We are a test prep organization catering to students all across the globe. In today's podcast, we have someone very special from Mumbai. Let's welcome Kunjan Shah. She's a very respected counselor from Mumbai and has helped countless students to discover their career paths and navigating through their complex college application process. Today, we'll deep dive into UK undergrad application process, the required timelines, and the standardized tests such as TMUA and ESAT.
Thank you so much, Shinjay. It was really lovely to be here on your podcast. And I think this is really a useful session for the students and their parents, right from grade 9 to 12, who are kind of planning their academic journey, combining with the kind of country they're looking at. And this year, I mean, from the past 2 years, because of the geopolitical, uh, kind of nuances, parents are much more worried. And I think doing this at this time is really the right time to do it. I've worked with Shinjay. Many of my students have been working with Shinjay for their test prep, for their SAT, APs, and now, of course, the TMUA and ESATs and all of those exams. So I think today it would be great to kind of, take time out to discuss all of this here.
Yes,
And yes, and lovely. Thank you so much. I mean, all the lovely parents and those who would be using this podcast as a reference later all the time.
great. So let's begin. So with the global education trends shifting, the UK seems to be a regaining moment. UK seems to be regaining quite a bit of momentum that we have observed amongst undergrad applicants. What are the key factors driving the interest today, and what should families be aware of when considering while considering UK as a destination?
So, Srinjay, UK has seen surgeons, but it wasn't always a popular choice. All
Hmm.
right. Why UK education makes sense? Because it's a 3 year undergrad degree compared to 4 years elsewhere. It's globally recognized. It's relatively transparent, their admission system. And all of this make it very appealing to students. All right. Their post-study work visa also work really well. But students need to understand that UK is not exploratory. So for the students who are not very sure about, what major they want to study or what they want to study over the undergrad, UK is very subject specific from day one. All right. And in UK, you need to prove your aptitude through grades, academic references, and super curricular engagement. 80% of your SOP should be your super curriculars related to your subject. So based on the final growth, predicted grades, all of this, UK becomes very popular. The kind of current situation with US visas and the story around that visa appointments are not really as open as frequent as it used to be in the earlier years. UK has now become the priority for students who had always considered US as their priority. So I have seen students adding more UK universities to their list. So though they're applying to the US, but they're still keeping UK either as their option A or as an option B or C, right? So UK, Singapore, Europe, all of these have come into students' lists sometimes, who were primarily just US focused. Mhm. Right? And as we know that UK is not very SAP pro, and that's where they have their own subject specific tests, and yes, that's where sometimes like when parents are planning or when we are planning the whole timeline for the students, usually SAT, ACT, these are the priorities on students' minds, and then comes the APs. But sometimes they forget to kind of consider these tests in their timeline and their education. And now with the surgence in the UK education, I think these have predominantly gained, favor, and students need to consider even prepping for those apart from the other ones, right? So,
Okay.
So, Sanjay, I would like to understand from you, for the audience, of course, uh, what are these tests and how and when does one start prepping for them?
Mhm. So, of course, there is SAT, is ACT, and APs, which we are all well versed with. There are exams like TARA, ESAT, TMUA, which have gained popularity just because there has been some changes in the geopolitical scenario, like you mentioned, and the growing uncertainty around undergrad or postgrad or education in general in the US. So families, like you said, I'll just reiterate, like you said, you people are still applying to the US, but they want to keep options open elsewhere as well.
Right.
So UK has always been a strong, prominent choice, and over the last few years, we have witnessed greater interest from students than before. And in line with this trend, we have observed a significant rise in the demand of ESAT and TMUA over the last 1 year. Anticipating this rise in demand, we began developing our content, course structure, and training of these exams over a year ago, and we are excited to share that we officially launched our TMUA and ESAT programs, coaching assistance, earlier this year.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, so as we all know, or if we don't know, SAT we can do earlier. The student can do the SAT exam over grade 10, grade 11, 12, right? The TNU and ESAT, Shinder, can the student take it in the year earlier or do they need to?
They should ideally be taking it once they have moved to 12th. And
Correct.
it also helps. You start with APs, you have a few APs that you can start preparing for early. There are certain APs which you can only start after a certain point in time based on how much you know. There are certain prerequisites required for certain APs. Of course, there is SAT that comes in between, not in between, but when you keep
Alongside.
a timeline, you APs are conducted only once a year. So ESAT and TMUA should ideally be taken when you are in 12th,
Right.
ideally in October. They're conducted twice a year in October and January. So October is ideally when you should take these tests.
Right, of course. That I'm aware of, that a TMU or an ESAT taken a year earlier is not considered valid. You need to take it in
Yes,
the year when
yes,
you're applying.
precisely.
All
Yeah.
right. And once you share once you know your final programs and once you finalize your program from the UCAS, you would know what test is required for what university and what program. And that's when you can register for the test between August to September, October, and the test is administered in October. But I want to understand from you, if the student knows from grade 11 that he would be applying to these programs and these are the tests required, uh, what's the timeline needed for preparation for this test? So, should they start prepping eventually from grade 11, or it's doable if they prepare for a few months in grade 12?
You so there are parts of ESAT which you can do early, but okay, we are talking about the entire paper. There are parts which you can only start when you are in 12th, because
Okay.
there is calculus, a component like calculus, which you will only learn later in 12th. Not that you can't start preparing early, but then there are certain prerequisites, the basics of the basics that you need in order to start preparing for calculus. So that happens a little late, probably in 11. So ideally, you should start preparing once. I think 3 to 4 odd months should be sufficient for someone, preparing for ESAT or TMUA, uh, provided they don't clash with your curriculums, your school grades. And yeah, yes, that's about it. So for students targeting top UK universities, I know you mentioned that UK universities have always been in demand. I mean, it has its own set of history. Uh, Targeting UK universities, what are some of the most important steps that they should be focusing on during their entire preparation and application journey, and what should the timeline roughly be like?
So, Shinjay, basically, the student should ideally begin in grade 9 and 10. All right. Over grade 9 and 10, they should explore various interests. I mean, UCAS has something called a Spring Pod, and even the UCAS platform allows students to explore various subjects by taking, short lessons or short classes. So, say, for example, if a student is interested in, a mix like economics and business and finance, they can take various short courses or classes to see what exactly from that cluster are they interested in. Or there may be students who were still not very sure. So they're confused whether they want to do sciences or between engineering or any humanities subjects or any of the commerce subjects. So this is the time, grade 9 and 10, they should explore all of these. And by the end of grade 10, they should they should be certain that what major they are kind of moving towards. For UK, you need to fix this early on. For US, is fine if you still undecisive over grade 11 and 12. Okay, but for UK, by the end of grade 10, you should have explored all the topics, all the subjects, all the majors, and fix what major you're going to apply. Okay, so this is for grade 10. Once you move to grade 11, that's where you start aligning. So for UK admissions, for most of the majors, they have some subject requirements. And your subjects over grade 11 and 12 should match the requirements for each major. So if you're not sure what major you're applying to, you will not be sure whether the subjects that you're doing over grade 11 and 12 do really complete the entrance requirement.
Requirements. Right, right, right.
So by end of grade 10, you should be sure about the kind of programs you're applying to and what subjects do they require, and then accordingly plan your grade 11 and 12 board and subjects. All right. Okay.
That's right.
Apart from finalizing your subjects, you should also, so they for UK they need super curriculars and not extracurriculars. So say your hobbies like dance or sports or all other things that are not related to the major that you're applying to do not matter much to the colleges. All right. Like UK value, US values all of that, all your extracurriculars and your leadership and your volunteering and all of that. But UK would want you to go deep dive into your subject and establish expertise there. So you read books related to that subject, you do research papers related to that subject, you give extra examinations like Olympiads, your AP exams related to that major or subject to establish that, okay, apart from your school curriculum, you are also academically challenging yourself outside your curriculum and showing expertise there, right? So you need to develop your super curriculars over grade 11 and 12. All right. By end of grade 11, okay, that's by July, you should have figured out all your courses that you're taking and make sure what are the entrance exams for those courses. That's when exactly you know that do you need an ESAT or do you need a TMUA. So ESAT is basically for engineering. It's the first time this year that is happening, right?
Yeah.
Prior to this, it was called as ENGA, and then they had something else for the sciences. So now they've merged the engineering and the sciences test into something called as ESAT. And then there is TMUA, which is for math heavy courses or physics heavy courses. And then Tara, we would like to know from you more what are the specific subjects there. So by July, you should be certain what are the majors that you're applying to and what tests are required for each. And then, of course, we would like to know from you what are the components of each of these tests, children. So if the student says that, okay, all my courses require an ESAT, what are the components there? What are the components at TMU and what are the components in the Tararas? Like, if you could brief us there, it would be very helpful.
I'll talk more about ESAT and TMUA. So the ESAT is a standardized test. It's a standardized test with three modules. Module one has math as a compulsory section. Module two has two sections, uh, which you can choose from math two, physics, chemistry, and biology. You can also choose to take three sections if you wish to. So maths, one section is has basic maths such as number system, algebra, ratio and proportions. Math 2 is calculus based.
Okay.
So each of these sections is of 40 minutes and they have 27 questions.
All
The
right.
questions are MCQ in nature and there's no negative marking. And the scoring of each of this section is on a scale of 1 to 9, and the composite score 1 to 9, yes, and the composite score is the average of these sections. So like I already said, ESAT is conducted in October and January, and October is ideally when most of the applicants take it, because that's what's accepted by the colleges. Now, TMUA is math heavy. So there are two papers. Math 1, it has basic mathematics such as algebra and functions and coordinate geometry, um, as well as calculus. So it has calculus too, point to be noted. Math 2 is absolutely based on logic and argument. Each paper is of 75 minutes long and has 20 questions each. So 75 minutes for 20 questions. So level is high. I mean, you need to spend more time on each of the questions. All again MCQs, no negative marking on a scale of 1 to 9, and anything above 6.5 is considered a good score. And when we are talking about the subjects, when we are hearing more about subject focused exams being accepted by UK universities, which institutions currently consider assessments like APs, TMUA, ESAT, and how do they influence admission outcomes?
Right. So, of course, from the point of view of UK prefers these tests like their own tests, like TMUA, ESAT, and of course, they will look at the SAT score if you submit, but they're not very much. SAT is not at all required by any of the UK universities, and not primarily required. But of course, they do look at AP scores a lot. But in fact, for certain programs at LSE, Cambridge, if you are from, say, an Indian curriculum like HSC curriculum or IC curriculum, it's recommended that you need to have the AP exams to kind of demonstrate that you are academically challenged yourself and have that kind of rigorous curriculum. All right. So APs are something which are accepted by, I think, all countries. All right. So US, of course, primarily you get credits for your AP scores once you are into the US undergrad program, and you can graduate faster if you have more APs, right? UK, of course, accepts AP scores, and they're required by many programs. Apart from this, Singapore looks at AP scores and SAT scores very, very well. So NUS and TU require the SAT, and they do look at AP scores. Colleges like colleges in Europe, like the colleges in the Netherlands or ETH Zurich, or those kind of schools, they also consider the SAT and the APs. All right, and sometimes I've seen my students mentioning. So you cannot officially submit your TMUA and ESAT scores there, but you can mention them in your motivational letters, and it's
Understood.
an advantage.
Right.
It's an advantage because they know that these are the subject specific exams that you have done, and if you've scored really well, mentioning them in your motivational letter helps those schools to understand. So though these exams like TMU and ESAT are UK specific, it does help for other areas as well. And exams like APs, I think they're accepted all across. Even Australian universities accept APs for credits. Okay, so there are few Australian universities which will also give you credits for your AP scores. So APs are immensely valuable. SAT are like the standardized test. Even India, so many Indian colleges have started accepting the SATs like Ashoka, Flame, Jindal, like NMIS, all of
Right.
these. And if you are applying through, if you're applying through the SAT quota, sometimes you are competing with a smaller pool than the larger pool, which would either be giving the NPATs or the college specific test. So if you have a good SAT score, you have advantage for Indian admissions as well, right? So SAT has been very, very valuable for US, Singapore, India as well, Europe, everywhere, right? So this is the landscape. Like SAT and APs were always popular, but now the UK tests are gaining popularity. And though they are only UK specific, you can mention those scores in some other applications,
Understood.
specifically Europe, right?
Understood.
Right. So, Shinjay, I would love to understand from you now, since we are talking about the SATs, the APs, the TMUA SAT, and of course, the students are doing IBs and or preparing for CBSE, whatever curriculum, right? They are overloaded with preparation. They are overloaded with tests. I mean, believe me, that timeline is looks so busy, and it's overwhelming to feel that I need to do this test, I need to do this, I need to do this. So what are the similarities between the preparation? Are there any common areas, like say if you've done these APs, the ESAT becomes a little easier, or are there any common intersected areas in maths or the sciences which are common across the SAT prep, AP prep, and the UK admissions tests? And
Certainly.
they're different, how different they are.
Yes, yes. So, if you have done SAT, what is SAT? I like to put it in this way. It's a test of your skills, not knowledge.
All right.
Whatever you do in SAT, whatever you learn in SAT, it's something that you have started probably back in fifth, sixth grade, basic algebra, unitary method, geometry, and but the core component of SAT is what you learn in ninth and tenth, content wise. Uh, APs are very, very subject specific. There might be subjects that you might not even be doing throughout your school ever, but you can take it as an AP. I mean, especially when it comes to IB, why do people, even IB students take APs? Because you probably couldn't do a subject back in school because of the limitations. You took it through APs. So there could be, so of course, then that particular subject has no connect with SAT. So, how does one test differ from the other? I mean, IB, CBSE, SAT. The know-how is the same, but the skills required are different. They are assessed differently. You have to know the testing, the assessment, the style of testing for each of these tests differently. You need to practice more. You need to unlearn certain ways and learn certain newer ways to approach one test. So, math. So, coming to ESAT, the math one component is somewhat similar to SAT, somewhat, not entirely the same. Math 2 is calculus based. So if we compare it to APs or A level or IB, uh, it's somewhere in between. So it's less compared to the level is less compared to A level or AP or IB. A level or AP, they are of lower levels. They are comparatively lower levels, but they are certainly higher than the SAT. But if you have prepared for SAT previously, it helps. The style of testing, they are somewhat similar.
Shinji, can you focus more on like ESAT? What kind of uh, what kind of subjects if the student have done at IBs or APs? They would be
ESAT Math 1 is basic. It's sort of comparable to SAT. You have number system, algebra, ratio proportions, whereas Math 2 is calculus based. You learn calculus in an AP like calculus AB or calculus BC, or the calculus that you learn in 12th grade in IBDP2. So that is how they can be comparable. So below AP can be below AP or IB, but above SAT. So somewhere in between.
all right, all right. And for TMUA, what kind of math?
It's very, very math heavy. It's so when it comes to SAT or APs, it is very conceptual. You know the concepts, you practice well, and you get there. But when it comes to the TMUA, it is uh, very logic based.
All
So
right.
yeah, it's just not concepts, but then it's also the kind of logic that you apply. So that needs some sort of learning. The approach is different. which
So,
is why you have 75 minutes for only 20 questions.
so
Yeah.
I understand. So even if the content is same, the kind of testing which happens all across in each is very different. Some
Absolutely.
tests is testing the logical abilities, some tests is testing your strategy, and the other is testing your
Yes.
academic depth.
Yeah,
Right?
but you have to be well versed with quants. You have to love numbers in order to take these tests.
Right.
Just don't waste time because you have probably had a good score in SAT.
Hmm.
If you are really, really if you are really convinced about the universities that you might be applying for and they require TMUA, go for it.
Okay. So how long usually, Shinjay, it takes to prepare for the ESAT and the TMUA? If you're coaching, like how many hours of work do the students need to put in? If you can kind of brief us about the timeline.
Again, very subjective, varies from one student to the other. In the kind of grasping power you have, the kind of guidance that you get, even you request study materials. So somewhere between 25 to 40 hours of learning, and then of course it is important to appear for enough sample tests or mock tests, whatever you term it, and get them evaluated, get a feedback, correct the errors. So if you have someone guiding you, a mentor, a teacher, so you eliminate all the redundancy, you save time, you manage your time well. So there's some sort of discipline because end of the day we are talking about teenagers.
Right, right, exactly. And discipline and time management are crucial here. So
Absolutely.
how many practice tests would you advise a student prepping for ESAT to take on an average?
For any test, there's no thumb rule, but I think at least six to 10 tests should be sufficient, but just not taking tests, but also getting a good feedback. Even if you are working yourself,
Your teacher, yes.
understand where you are committing the errors, maintain an error log so that you don't repeat those mistakes.
These are great tips, I think, maintaining an error log. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that you should certainly do. That's a thumb rule for each and every single student we work with at Utela. When you are going through a testing cycle, so we call it a testing cycle right before uh, the actual SAT, a month prior to the actual SAT or TMUA or ESAT. When you are going through several tests, you have to maintain an error log so that you can figure out where you had committed the error, and yeah, you have everything ready. You don't repeat that error. You just skim through those errors. So outside UK, which are the countries that accept SAT for undergraduate admissions, and in what ways is it evaluated compared in comparison to the national curriculum boards of results? If you can emphasize a little more on this, especially SAT.
Perfect. So SATs are accepted universally, uh, except sometimes like not on UK applications. Sometimes it's not advisable. So it depends upon what your score is and what university and program you're applying that we guide students whether you submit your SAT scores or you mention your SAT scores on UK applications. But otherwise, all the rest. So US primarily, there are so many colleges who have started reinstating the SAT requirement, like which were
Yes.
relaxed post COVID. Like during COVID times, it was difficult. And
SAT has been optional. I'll just put a little bit of emphasis on this. SAT has been optional for a lot of colleges for a long time. It's during COVID when it got highlighted.
right, right. Yeah, of course. So there are a lot of colleges where SAT is optional and you can apply if you do not have a great score or you have not taken the SAT. But there are some primarily, very selective colleges that have started making SAT compulsory to even apply to those programs. So you need to be certain about your college list, at least your long list, and check whether your college requires SAT or SAT is optional. You need to also start looking at the data, right? From the accepted students pool, how many primarily submitted the SAT score? Because that changes the equation, right? It's okay that they made SAT optional, but how many students are they accepting who not submitted the SAT score?
Understood.
You need to even look at that graph, right?
Mhm.
For
Yes.
certain colleges, they accept 90% of their pool is from students who have submitted the SAT score. But there will be few other colleges where 60% of their student pool is students who applied SAT optional. Then you know that for this particular university, I do not need to stress on the SAT because a larger part of their cohort have been admitted.
Also, up to a certain extent, does it uh, also depend on the kind of major or the kind of course that you are applying for?
Usually not. Okay, it's not related to their major course because SAT is basically your test whether you would be able to take the curriculum, or you would be able to really be successful throughout your majors in that kind of heavy course. So yes, for certain majors, the math component of SAT becomes important. Like for engineering programs or math heavy programs, even if your English scores are a little low, that's fine, but they would want to see a 800 on the SAT math, right? But if you look at overall, it's basically overall the student's capacity to perform, to study, and to strategize, right? And many colleges have kind of done this study that they saw that the students who were admitted without the SAT scores, right, who were otherwise academically great GPAs, but they saw a dip in the performance of those students, right?
That's a very
Yeah.
uh,
And also, students are applying from all across the globe. There are various curriculums from where they're coming to. So, a certain program which is really, really very, giving a better GPA to students, or the scores are inflated and high, then those academic transcripts are not a common platform to compare a student A with student B, because they're coming from different curriculum backgrounds, from different countries, even in the same country, um, from different cities, right? Their academic transcripts become very difficult to compare, right? SAT gives a standardized universal test to kind of
so it's
compare and measure the students.
standard platform for everyone to show their
Right,
same set of
right,
skills.
right. So
So
maybe an HSC student scoring a 95 and an IB student scoring a 32, it becomes difficult to compare, right?
absolutely. From a counselor's point of view, even we have our own opinions as as a test prep organizations. We try to uh, uh, spread the timeline of APs, TMUA, SAT in a way where they can take numerous tests over a period of time. But what's from your point of view, what's a smart and stress-free timeline for SAT preparations for high schoolers, especially when they are juggling with their boards and IB coursework?
Yeah. So this is what we follow usually for most of my students. Though of course it's not like, it's not the same timeline for everybody. It depends upon case to case basis, customized, depending upon the student also, that we sometimes change the timeline. But what we ideally advise is for SATs, they should definitely start prepping in the end of the grade 10. They're done with the grade 10 exams, they have their summer breaks, the ideal time to prep for the SAT. Also, we ask these students to do the PSAT over grade 9 and 10, or 8, 9, and 10, depending upon wherever it's available at that school. So at least they're well versed with the style of the paper, the component of the SAT. So grade 9 and grade 10, ideally we would suggest to do the PSAT. If a student is really, really very, very smart, very good, in certain rare cases, the students have done the SAT exams in grade 10 as well.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like if they're planning to apply for some very, very, competitive summer programs, that SAT scores help, right? So,
Yes.
thumb of rule, majority of the students are advisable to start the SAT practice after grade 10 and take it in the first half of the grade 11. So, either take the exam in August or October or December. I think I always ask all my students to at least finish their first test round before December, okay, and do the second take.
Yes. So since you mentioned, students can even take SAT in 10th who are highly aspirational. We had a student who was in 10th last year, scored a perfect 1600 in SAT. It is possible to accommodate SAT prep and the test and get it out of the way even when you are in 10th grade.
It's possible, very much possible. It depends upon student, right? Whether the student is really requires only smaller efforts to kind of push them in that direction, whether they can manage it with the 10th grade course load. So it's not right for everybody, but yes, for highly academically strong students who are aspirational, I think doing it in grade 10 is really, really a very good idea, because then you can submit those scores if you're applying for any competitive programs, even for the summers after grade 10. So many of my students have done that, right? And they've been
Right.
successful in getting scores above 1550 or
Yes, 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 absolutely.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
so SAT definitely immediately after 10th grade, right? AP is also simultaneously. So I would suggest, if you are in a regular board, right, apart from IB board, I think it's smart to split your APs over your high school years. You can do a few in grade 9, because AP exams happen only once a year in May, right? And say if you're planning to do 4 or 5 APs, doing all those APs only in grade 11 will cramp your schedule. But what if you do 2 each year, right?
Yeah, so it depends on the what your aspirations are and the kind of APs that you have probably laid down for yourself. There are certain APs that you can take early, which doesn't need a lot of conceptual understanding. While there are certain APs which you cannot take unless you are in you can't start
Unless
exploring
you've done
unless you
that.
are in 11th. You need some prerequisites for calculus AB, calculus BC, or physics C, mechanics, or electricity and magnetism. These need some prior understanding. But at the same time, there are simpler APs. I wouldn't say
And then
simpler.
can you give us a brief on what APs the students can do earlier and what needs to be done later, because it needs prep. If you can mention a few, it would be
Yeah,
great.
yeah. So, some, like I said, certain APs which don't require some background, you can start it at any point in time. Just start right from the scratch, and you can take it up from there. uh, the ones inclined towards humanities, history, US history, or comparative government and politics, or psychology or EVS. Whereas a paper like computer science or statistics can be accommodated somewhere in between. Probably when you are in 10th, it can also be taken if you are good with numbers. You can take an AP stats when you are in 10th. You have started preparing in ninth and taking it in 10th, or just when you are about to finish ninth. But you have to be good with numbers. um, the same thing applies for computer science. If you know some sort of programming language, then it helps.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can do start preparing in 10th and take it in 11th. However, there are certain APs such as chemistry or physics, electricity and magnetism, physics C, mechanics. These have calculus. And of course, calculus AB and calculus BC. This can be taken only when you are in when are in 11, because that requires certain prerequisites
At
like
the end of grade 11 is what?
property, functions, and all those things. I also forgot to mention that a paper like microeconomics can be taken earlier. A paper like macroeconomics can be taken earlier, and these also give you a head start. Let me just also emphasize that these give you a head start in school. You finish all these even before you start preparing for them in school. I mean, even if you are in CBSE or maybe, so that's something which is it's a win-win situation.
So how much time again would you require to prep for an AP, right? I mean,
Varies from paper to paper. Calculus BC. So APs are year-long courses in the US school.
right.
You can't expect to finish off a calculus BC paper in a span of 3 months. It's not possible. Ideally, unless you have been preparing something, you have done pre-calculus concepts before. So I think you should put in an amount of 5 to 6 months for a paper like calculus BC. Whereas a paper like microeconomics can take 3 to 4 months. It really depends on the papers that you are taking, on the APs that you have chosen, and also your as a student, how
Student,
your
how much is your
thought
cost?
is. How
Right.
some kids are a little slower than the others. Some kids grasp things faster. So it also depends, varies from one student to the other.
Right, right. And what are some resources students can use to prep for all these tests, Shinja? Like, say, an SAT or an AP or a TMU? Are there any resources which are helpful if the student?
Absolutely, APs, all these for APs, Barons, and all this. If you want to self prep, these books are available on the app on Amazon. You should definitely take some mock tests. There's college boards blue book which you can use in order to take sample tests. But these are sample tests. These are stagnant. I mean, they uploaded. They remain there for a while and they change it after some time. So of course, we are there as an organization if you need help. But if you are motivated, honestly, if you are very motivated, you can do it yourself.
So,
But
if you can
resources are
recommend any books or any websites which they can use.
yeah, College Board and Barron's. These are good for APs. There are Princeton reviews. These books are very helpful. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of resources. There's no dearth of resource.
There's no good resources.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
And we have talked a lot about APs and UK. So before we conclude, I have this one question. So when it comes to advanced placement exams, how many should a student realistically aim to take in an academic year without any burnout?
Right. So,
And yeah, carry
yeah.
on.
No,
That's
no, no, please complete your question. I'm so sorry.
and as even though I wanted to emphasize something beyond APs, I thought let me just ask this question, and I would also want to know what are the other destinations that people are really looking at, other countries that are emerging as strong contenders for undergrad studies.
Right. Great. So first, let me take the AP part, and then I'll move to what are the other countries that are being added to our students' lists. Right. So for APs, ideally, I mean, see, usually most students who are doing other academic curriculums need 4 or 5 APs max. That's what we said. There are students who've done more, okay, and those are very few 0.5, 0.2% students who are really so good that they can, kind of manage that kind of load. But 4 APs is what we usually suggest our students taking. And I would ideally say split it over 2 years. All right. So 2 or 3 APs max in a year is what I've usually seen doable. All right. Where you can either merge 2 heavy APs with 1 lighter AP so that the course load becomes manageable. I have had students who've done 4 APs all straight at the end of grade 11 because that's when we need it, right? They missed registering for it at the end of grade 10. In grade 10 in May, they've not done it in grade 9 May. Then the only year they can do it where they can submit it on their college applications is the end of grade 11. Okay. There are students doing AP exams at the end of grade 12 also. They can mention it on their applications that we are prepping for this, right? But in India, they'll not be added to their transcripts as predicted scores because it's not like the AP curriculum where, an ongoing class 12 subjects will also be mentioned in the class 12. So you cannot add an AP done after grade 12 in your college admissions, but it will be useful to you once you are admitted to a US university for getting credits. All right. So
Right.
for getting credit. So students do it at the end of grade 11 and at the end of grade 12. But ideally, whatever is done till the end of grade 11 is what goes on in applications and can be of advantage to you in your admission decisions, right? So I would definitely recommend 4 to 5 APs. And again, the scores which are either 4 or 5 to be mentioned on your applications.
Right.
A
Right.
score of 3, a score of 2 is not something that
Yeah, because with APs, you are trying to emphasize on your proficiency in a particular subject.
Right.
If you don't get a perfect score, it's absolutely
That's
pointless.
right. So yeah, so 5 is of course ideal, but
Yeah,
4 is equally, I mean, yeah, acceptable.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
so Srinjay, what's the difference between a 4 and a 5? Like, what's the kind of score difference? I mean, by how many marks you miss a 5 to a 4? I don't know that. So,
It all depends from year to year. It's a percentile. Um, Probably an 85 percentile can get you a 5 in certain years, whereas um, in a particular year where the paper was comparatively more challenging, a 79% can also get you a 5. So that's how it is.
all right.
But you should target scoring a 5 in APs. That is what I always suggest. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of course. The 5 is the ultimate score, which looks good on your profile.
It is possible to get a 5 with the right amount of effort and guidance. It is possible to get a 5. So, before concluding, we have talked a lot about the UK, but what are the other countries emerging as strong contenders for undergraduate studies, especially for globally inclined students looking at looking at academic strength, career pathways, and return on investment, and what tests really align?
So of course, so we all know, right? The kind of countries or the location of the college all depends upon the student's fit, right? It cannot be the same for every student or every family. You need to align with, what's your budget? Is the student mature enough uh, to be, to fit for that kind of destination? And again, what's your major? Are you looking at more research-oriented universities or real-world application universities? And the location can change depending upon that. US had been always popular because the amount of universities present in the US and the kind of research facilities and the kind of overall culture vibe acceptance of the students. Like, in US you can name I think 100 top universities which would be all really good and you can go and study there. And in the other destinations, maybe you can count those top schools on your fingertips, like maybe 15 odd schools are good schools for students to apply and go to, right? But apart from the US, Canada, which was a little down over the past few years, have started gaining back the popularity again because of
There are some fabulous colleges and universities.
fabulous colleges,
Yeah.
very, very big. So U of T, UBC, all of
Yeah.
those, like, yeah,
Yeah.
McGill, McMaster, all of those are very, very popular and great programs to study. And the Australian PR is also always a brownie point where
Absolutely.
parents feel that it's a good idea to go to. Australia also has some great programs and colleges, and the kind of work life balance and the kind of it's not academically too rigorous, but yet great programs and great results. So Australia had been popular and is gaining more popularity even now, right?
Absolutely.
Europe is very popular. Alright, specifically Netherlands, Germany, Spain, the IE Spain, and a few other universities in Spain are becoming very popular with the students. So Netherlands, Germany, Spain, ETH Zurich, so certain universities in so basically for engineering students or science students, they also do Netherlands, Spain, Switzerland, that kind of combination.
Absolutely, absolutely. People, I mean, they want to keep their options open for every all the destinations. It's just not limited to UK, US, or Singapore, or Hong Kong, or
Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan is getting very
yeah,
popular.
Japan is surprisingly. I mean, there have
Surprisingly, they
been
are now kind of, investing their time looking at the Indian market, making the programs open for Indian students. So Japan has been popular. UAE is kind of a sweet spot, closer to home. And
absolutely,
you get to study in a US or a UK university, but based in UAE. So
absolutely,
yeah, UAE is getting very popular for many of the students, for many families who are looking at a closer to home option,
absolutely,
considered a
absolutely,
safe option, right?
absolutely. It's a very safe place to be.
Very safe place to be. So for many students who where the parents are a little, not very ready to. kind of,
their kids far off, which
UA
requires a
is,
lot of travel
yeah,
time.
yeah, UA is becoming popular. And our very own home country, India, is.
Of course, we
Yeah.
how can we? I mean,
Okay,
I
forget that.
mean,
There are so many, I mean, with the new.
universities and the kind of courses they offer. I mean, we can't say like they haven't evolved over time. They are not living under the rocks anymore. So things
With
are
the new NEP, the things are changing. I mean, IIM has started many undergrad programs in business and economics, which was not, I mean, they were never into the undergrad sector, right? But they moved up. There are new courses by IITs. There's so many new liberal art colleges which are offering those some really very exploratory programs right here in our country. So many foreign universities are setting up their campuses here. So very soon we'll have many more of those. So yes, India is also kind of becoming popular. Yes, and
absolutely.
yeah. So these are the places we have seen this year. These are the countries gaining popularity this year.
I think, I mean that I think we have touched most of the points that we sort of had plans, the kind of plans that we have had. But thank you so much. It was very insightful, and it's as always lovely to, sit over a cup of coffee and chat with you, talking
Yeah, of
about
course.
applications and standardized tests. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, and we look forward to meeting you soon.
Same, yes, Shinjay. Likewise, it's always so much knowledge that we always share.
Absolutely, absolutely.